Environmental Justice in Altgeld Gardens by Khalil Parsons. In 1945, after World War II, Altgeld Gardens was built as housing for African American veterans. It was built out of the way of white housing and on the cheapest land possible. The land beneath and around Altgeld Gardens were landfills, factories, and polluted rivers. But African Americans in the community had to live with it. Where else would they go? They had no money and nothing else after the war. This is called environmental injustice and environmental racism. Because the community members were black, the environment chosen for them was filled with toxins and pollutants. Altgeld Gardens now has a better environment, and the blacks in Altgeld Gardens have more rights. This is because of an environmental activist named Hazel Johnson, who just showed just how powerful African Americans can be. Hazel originally lived in a place in New Orleans, Louisiana known as Cancer Alley. Hazel was the only one of her 4 siblings who survived to adulthood, much like a young sea turtle in his life. After these hardships, she moved to Chicago in her adulthood, only to be faced by more hardships. Hazel started a family with a man named Amos Johnson. Around her in Altgeld Gardens, many people were falling victim to cancer, such as 4 little girls Hazel said could fit in the shoebox. But Amos Johnson falling victim to lung cancer is what spurred Hazel to become an environmental activist. Anyone living in Altgeld Gardens would know that the factories surrounding them were causing a lot of pollution. It was one of the many parts of the toxic donut, but it was Hazel's first target. In the late 70s to the 90s, Hazel Johnson observed and documented illness in her neighborhood to build up a case against the corporations surrounding the neighborhood. With her data in the early 80s, Hazel Johnson went to city officials demanding that they test the water and air. What they found shocked Hazel and the community around them. Cyanide and other dangerous toxins were found in the water. As well as cyanide in the drinking water, there were also toxins called asbestos in the air. Asbestos are a mineral fiber commonly used in building construction materials for insulation and as a fire retardant. Asbestos get released into the air by demolition construction or if asbestos are disturbed or damaged in any way. Asbestos increases risk of developing lung disease, and its effect is taken much heavier on smokers. After finding both of these things, Johnson worked closely with a young organizer named Barack Obama to eradicate asbestos in the neighborhood. Their campaign was successful and the removal began a year later.
I've been sleeping here instead. I've been sleeping in my bed.
At the start of her efforts to help Altgeld Gardens in 1979, Hazel founded People for Community Recovery, or PCR for short, and about 70 women began to meet in many places, like churches and houses, to discuss ways to help Altgeld Gardens. Shortly after Hazel's success with the asbestos campaign, PCR managed to get the city to provide hookups to the water system so that they could clean out the toxins and other harmful chemicals in the water. Another victory for PCR was shutting down the incinerator near Altgeld Gardens. The members of Altgeld Gardens thought this was what was releasing the noxious fumes into the air. In 1986, PCR protested outside of the incinerator until the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency got involved and charged the owners of the incinerator a $5 million fine and shut them down. Other successes PCR has had are prompting cleanup of waste sites in contaminated areas nearby Altgeld Gardens using public protest, community meetings, and other methods. PCR educated the community about the toxins still in their environment and has gained a lot of support. After more years of hard work with PCR, a monumental milestone was hit for Hazel Johnson, Altgeld Gardens, and all of America. In 1994, Bill Clinton signed an executive order bringing environmental justice to the forefront of American policy for the first time ever. In a nutshell, the executive order told federal agencies, such as the Environmental Protection Agency, Department of Health and Human Services, and 13 other departments to identify the environmental injustices, develop strategies to stop those injustices, and show those strategies to the public. Other instances of environmental injustice are/were in Huntington Park, California, Austin, Texas, Chester, Pennsylvania, and St. James Parish, Louisiana, or Cancer Alley. These were all predominantly African American or Hispanic places. The most effective place, though, was Altgeld Gardens, because that's where the environmental justice movement started. Some of the problems with these places were extremely high rates of cancer, asthma, terribly poor air quality, so much so it was an outlier in the state average, and very high blood pressure in children. These places were also positively affected by the executive order. Even though some of the results were less than significant, there were still positive results, mainly caused by Hazel Johnson. There were other environmental justice activists outside of Hazel Johnson at the time, and these people reinforced Hazel's beliefs, because unlike normal environmental activists that protest about nature and wildlife, these environmental justice activists protested about how the environment was hurting these people, so it was easier to relate to. Even with all these things to help it, Altgeld Gardens is far from perfect, or even a desirable place to live in. It still has a high cancer rate, asthma rate, and disease rate. But to put it in perspective, reading a government document on Altgeld Gardens, you will only find 2 positive actions made to Altgeld Gardens outside of Hazel Johnson's help. The city of Chicago has been very lazy in helping neighborhoods and communities in need, and even a community in as bad of shape as Altgeld Gardens would not have been touched without community help from PCR and Hazel Johnson. Come back to the claims I stated that said Hazel Johnson caused blacks in Altgeld Gardens to gain more rights and the environment in Altgeld Gardens to get better. You can see that these things are true because Hazel Johnson and PCR got rid of asbestos in the air, got cleaner water for Altgeld Gardens, helped shut down the incinerator that was causing noxious fumes to be released into the air, and educated the community about the toxins and pollutants in their environment. It would take a whole nother documentary to cover all the successes PCR and Hazel Johnson had, but to put it briefly, they accomplished a lot. Not only did Hazel help with the environment, but she also helped with black rights. Hazel did this by showing that African Americans could stop environmental racism and make a difference in their community. Hazel Johnson died in 2011 and she will be missed, but her legacy will be continued by her daughter Cheryl Johnson, the current leader of PCR. In Cheryl's turn as leader, she has gotten just as many things, if not more things, done than Hazel Johnson. Cheryl has used the same methods as Hazel, and she is currently getting the CHA, or the Chicago Housing Authority, to finish their redevelopment plans for Altgeld Gardens. Cheryl and PCR also did a project on cleaning the soil in Altgeld Gardens and succeeded. If Hazel were still here, she would have nothing to worry about, because Cheryl has it under control.
I don't know where I went wrong.
To conclude, Hazel Johnson has caused the environment in Altgeld Gardens to get better and for black people in Altgeld Gardens to have more rights. Thank you for watching. All credits to the song in this video go to the Lumineers. Screenwriter for this documentary, Khalil Parsons. Executive producer, Khalil Parsons. Narrator, Khalil Parsons. Editor, Khalil Parsons. Thanks to my mom for driving me to Altgeld Gardens.